Hey, I'm Paul from VRP Rocks, and I'm delighted to be joined by another legendary musician, a man who's worked on so many records, it's probably impossible to count them all. I am talking about the legend that is Russ Kunkel.
Hey, how are you, Paul?
I'm good. Thank you very much for joining me, Russ. I mean, I said there it'd be impossible to count your records. Have you any idea how many records or albums you've played on?
I don't.
You can't even venture to guess.
I've played on enough to make me incredibly happy and feel very grateful.
Indeed, indeed. And you've come up with your five favorite records that you've played on. And honestly, this must have been a very tough exercise for you because, as we said, you've played on so many. So was it quite difficult trying to narrow down to five?
I chose these because I think that when I look at my career, and I don't often do it, but when I do look at it, the fact that I was able to play on these particular records and work with these artists uh, is very impactful for me. Like I realize how grateful I am and what a wonderful life I've had to be able to work on albums that were so ended up being so iconic.
Yeah.
And over such a short period of time, I think the albums that I picked are probably all within a 3 or 4 year period of time, from 1970 to 1975. I'm guessing at that. So, but
Absolutely.
but that kind of categorizes my choices, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. We'll run through them. And I did speak with your good friend Leland recently, and we did a top five, and he said it was five of his favorite albums. That's the way he categorized it. So,
Yeah.
but just to run you through, I mean, of these records, they are absolutely incredible. There's a gold certified album, a platinum certified album, a triple platinum album, a quadruple platinum album, and an album that went 14 times platinum. Three of these records made Rolling Stone magazine's top 500 albums of all time. Two are in the Grammy Awards Hall of Fame, and one has been voted or awarded the greatest album ever made by a female on more occasions than I care to count. This is an incredible list, and I can't wait to hear these stories behind them. So let's start with the first one. We're going to go in chronological order. We're going to start in February 1970 when Sweet Baby James was released by James Taylor. So why did you choose this one, Russ?
Oh, well, it was a pivotal point in my career to be hired by Peter Asher to play on that album. Basically changed my life, and the long friendship that I've had with James and with Peter, it's like a domino effect. It led to so many other things that I was able to do. Um, James Taylor at that time uh, was already iconic. No one knew it. His songwriting prowess and the way he played guitar, his demeanor, his stature, the way he appeared, his good looks. He was kind of a matinee idol, in an instant. And none of us knew it because we were right in the middle of it and doing it. And the recording of that album didn't take very long. We recorded it at Sunset Sound Studios in Los Angeles. It was engineered by a man named Bill Lazarus. Carole King played on it, Danny Korchmar, myself. Leland Sklar didn't play on that. It was a bass player called Bobby West that played on it, steel guitar player named Red Rhodes. And it was magical. It was a magical time. It went by very quickly. And the next thing you know, I'm looking at the cover of that thing, and I don't know what the first single was. I don't know if it was Sweet Baby James or Fire and Rain, but I know Fire and Rain went on to be, a very well-known song of James's that's, a staple in his shows. The song was a kind of song where there were lots of holes in it where he was just kind of pedaling a certain chord, and when we rehearsed them, I chose to accentuate those pieces of the song with some tom fills, and he liked it and Peter liked it, and it kind of went on to be something that I'm known for.
And so what was it like being in the studio with him then? Because as you said, he had that magic even before people knew it. And so what was it like being in the studio working with him and putting these tracks down?
Well, James was very quiet then. He would sit there and play his acoustic guitar, and just brilliant stuff would come out, you know.
Fantastic. And obviously, as you said there, the big hits came out, Fire and Rain. I think Country Road was another hit off that record. So how are you at this point? You're quite young. You start on this record as well, and you're seeing hits in the charts. I mean, how does that make you feel at the time?
Well, it made me feel great. And then, of course, Peter's genius was to send the people that made the record out on the road with James. Carol went for the first tour. Leland came on that. That's the first time Leland, Danny, and I and James played together, was on the tour for Sweet Baby James. And then Carol couldn't do it, and that's when we brought in Craig Durgee to be the keyboard player. So I toured extensively with James for years. So that album led to all of that, plus, working with Peter on other projects, on Linda Ronstadt albums, and, up and down the line. So it was a very
Absolutely.
significant pinnacle point in my career for sure.
Fantastic stuff, and a great
And
record to
then,
kick us off with. Oh, sorry, carry on.
no, and then right across town, almost immediately after that, and I think this is the chronological order, I was in the studio at A&M Studio B with Carol King and Lou Adler, playing on some of the songs of Tapestry.
Ah, lovely stuff. Well, I think that comes up next after the one I'm going to speak about next. I think October 1970 is the one we're going to do now, and a certain Bob Dylan, obviously a huge star at this point. The album you've chosen is New Morning. So why this one?
Um, well, I was in New York City doing an album with Peter, by a man named Tony Kosanek. We finished the record. I was about to go home the next day. Peter called me. He said, "Put your drums in a cab, get over to CBS Studios." And I said, "Why? Are we cutting more tracks?" He said, "No, Bob Dylan and George Harrison are in town and they need a drummer. They want to record." So I went over and I did that. And I spent the whole night, I don't, but we were probably there till 6 in the morning, just jamming basically. And Al Cooper was there. Charlie Daniels was there playing bass.
Wow.
Our player named Ron Cornelius. Bob Johnston was the producer. Bob called me a month later and asked me to come back to New York and play on Bob's album New Morning. So because of my connection with Peter Asher, I got to do that New Morning album, which it has become kind of a favorite album of a lot of people. It's kind of like a little bit under the radar, but when you get to record and be around Bob Dylan, it's like being around Marcus Aurelius. He's an amazing human being, and one of the most amazing artists of our time, and a very, very interesting man. And we got along really, really well. Few words. He's a man of few words to people. He lets his songs do his talking, but again, a very pinnacle album for me, for sure.
And in terms of that record itself, when you listen back now, are there any standout tracks on there that you particularly like?
Well, yeah, all of them. When you record with Bob Dylan, there's never many takes.
Yeah.
So I listen to it back now, and I think of them as mistakes, but they're kind of happy accidents because they were good enough to be on the record. Bob doesn't like anything to be perfect, and neither do I, to a great degree. But there's a feeling on that record that's spontaneous and it's wonderful.
Absolutely. It's funny you say that because I spoke with Pig Withers, a drummer from Dire Straits who worked with Bob and Slow Train Running and that record and everything that came around. And he echoed pretty much what you said. Bob likes to get in a couple of takes at most, no overdubs, that sort of stuff. It was get in, get out. He was happy as long as Bob was happy. So, yeah, interesting stuff.
All it takes is a lot.
Indeed, yeah. In terms of working with Bob, then, I mean, because at this point he had already had some huge albums and singles out and things like that, and he was a megastar, wasn't he? And you mentioned George Harrison, working with him and getting that call. I mean, how mind blowing was that to be around those sorts of people?
It's those are pinch yourself moments. When I was in the studio playing with Bob and George, I, had Bob Dylan in one ear and George Harrison in the other ear, and I think I had just finished smoking a giant spliff, and I couldn't believe I was like in heaven. I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
Incredible. Incredible. That album itself came out just a couple of months, didn't it, after Self-Portrait, which got a kind of a lot of criticism at the time, didn't it? And did that reaction affect what happened on this record, do you think?
I can't speak to that, but it would seem it did. I think you're probably right.
Well, there we go. We'll leave it at that. Let's move on to our next choice then, and someone that you've spoken about a few times and spoken about fondly, of course. And again, an incredible, incredible record came out February 1971, won 4 Grammy Awards, 14 times platinum in the US alone. Silly question. Why did you choose this one, Russ?
Well, basically because I love Carole King. She's a dear friend, and every time I've had the opportunity to work with her, whether it be live in concert or in the studio, it's just nothing but joyful noise. And the fact that she kind of broke the glass ceiling, for female singer-songwriters, it just she's amazing, and she deserves it. And the body of her work speaks for itself. And I just was, again, so much gratitude to have been able to be even a small part of it.
Absolutely. And again, it must be difficult when you're in the middle of it, but when you're recording this and you're in the studio and you're hearing these songs, could you feel at that point in time that this was something special?
I knew that she was special. And looking around the room and seeing James Taylor in their recording, I knew that there was something happening here. What it is isn't exactly clear at the moment, but in hindsight, which is always 2020, we knew. You look back and you go, okay, what we were kind of thinking really happened. We didn't want to jinx it, but it ended up being great music that resonated with the whole population.
Yeah, it did. And you mentioned resonating. It's something that still resonates to this day. I mean, 2016, I think Carole King came over to Hyde Park in London and performed the album all the way through. And the crowd, it was 65,000, but it was from teenagers all the way upwards. And why do you think it is then that music has stood the test of time and still resonates with all the different generations?
She was those songs on Tapestry really, really speak. They speak for everyone, but they really speak to the empowerment of women and the things that women go through, normal things, everyday things, changes. And no one was doing that quite the same way Carol was. And Carol kind of became every woman in that album. And that resonates and that connects. And anything that connects and resonates with women eventually connects and resonates with men because it has to.
Good point indeed. And it is like a greatest hits album. But again, is there any particular highlights on that record for you?
Only that it happened very quickly. Lou wanted to create, like he says in the documentary, the atmosphere of her being in her living room. And we did, and we didn't take a long time. Carol and Lou knew what they wanted, and we got right to it. And there was never very many takes of any of the songs. And again, it was just one of those, just a joyous experience, and it went by very quickly.
And an incredible record it is too. And let's move on to choice four now. And again, another incredible female artist, another incredible record as well. Released in 1971, voted the greatest Canadian album of all time. Rolling Stone magazine had this at number 3 of the greatest albums of all time in their recent 2020 poll. Another timeless classic. We're talking about Joni Mitchell with Blue.
Yeah. Well, what you just said pretty much sums it up. Um, on one side of town, you had Carole King doing what she was doing. On the other side of town, in Laurel Canyon, well, Carole was in Laurel Canyon as well. You have Joni, a whole different palette of colors, and as Carol's finger was on the pulse of certain things, Joni's finger was on the pulse of other things, and equal room for all of them. You know, Joni Mitchell is so many things. She's an artist in every sense of the word. Every medium that you can think of, she's touched. I personally think that Joan is a great percussionist. She's a great drummer. Her rhythm sense is immaculate. If you listen to the way she plays dulcimer or the way she plays guitar, she taps out beats when she's playing, and it's incredibly in time. So I related and had a lot of simpatico for her, with her, because of that. And her songs just took you away. They were intimate, feelings of, certainly some things, feelings of hers, but feelings of other people. She was able to meet someone, get a feeling for who they are, and then write their song for them. I think the song, "He Went to Paris," or no, not "He Went to Paris." "Free Man in Paris" is a song that she kind of wrote for her friend David Geffen, but it completely encapsulated what David was probably going through at that time. So not every artist can do that,
No.
but she can. And so in the studio, a lot of the songs she had already had the basic tracks down, which would be her vocal and a guitar part or a dulcimer. I would overdub on some of them. Stephen Stills and I think overdubbed on Carrie. I don't know if she played live with us. Stephen played bass. I played a conga part and a shaker. I think I only played drums on one song. I think it was California, and they're very light. The drums and the percussion are very subtle on that album, but they play a part. James Taylor was there playing some guitar and singing on a couple songs, but Joni and Henry Louis had a gem, and all they did was just keep polishing it with little pieces.
Absolutely. And just as an overall, I mean, these first four records we've spoken about all came out within a year or two at most. I mean, we're talking a really short space of time, and you're talking about these incredible names that are all just kind of floating about and working together. James and Carol and Joni and Bob and George and everyone else that was involved at this time. I mean, this must have been an incredible time to be coming through and becoming a musician and being part of all this.
Absolutely incredible. Yeah. My mind was blown and is blown by the fact that I was able to be there, and that these people are still my friends.
Absolutely. And just in terms of Joni as well, we've spoken about her fantastic songwriting and musicianship and things like that. But something else that makes her unique is her voice. I mean, it's so distinctive. It's beautiful, isn't it?
It's gorgeous, and even now when she performs, which everyone is so grateful for, that she has recovered so brilliantly and is able to go out there, and even though her voice is a little smokier than it was always smoky, but it's just a little bit more smoky, and I mean that in a great way. I love smoky voices, but it has nothing to do with smoke. But you can still her the way she affects words, you can still her footprint is still on her lyrics and her singing so amazingly. A few years ago, I was asked by Brandy Carlisle, who's a dear friend, to be a part of a concert at the Walt Disney Music Hall, where she wanted to perform the Blue album in its entirety one night. And that was a great honor because Joan was in the audience with Elton John, and Brandy is such an amazing artist and singer. She's just got so much going on. She did these songs from Blue impeccably, and she wanted me there because I played on I was there, and so was I'm trying to think of the violin player that played with Bob Dylan as well, Scarlett Rivera. She was there in the band too, so she wanted to pull from some of the original stuff, and it was brilliant. It wasn't recorded, it wasn't filmed, just the people that were there that night got to hear it, and it was an amazing experience to be able to do that and have Joan witness it.
F9. Fantastic stuff. And speaking of one fantastic vocalist to another, your final pick, number 5, then is Stevie Nicks and Belladonna. So why this record, Russ?
I just love women.
That's a great answer.
Um, the Belladonna album was my introduction into meeting Stevie Nicks and getting to know her, and I had worked with Jimmy Iovine before that on some Bob Seger stuff, but he called me in to play on that, and I got to work with Davy Johnstone from Elton's band and Roy Bittan from the E Street Band. It was an amazing assemblage of people, and Waddy. And that Waddy and I worked on that album together, and then we did a tour to promote that album, which was glorious fun. So for me, being a part of that album was great because I was a huge Fleetwood Mac fan, and we got to play uh, on tour some Fleetwood Mac songs, and I'm a huge fan of Mix, and I loved playing those songs. But the experience in the studio with Stevie and Jimmy Iovine was the same thing. Almost all the artists that I've worked with, things happen quickly. We're in the studio. I think we ran down a little bit of Edge of 17. Jimmy Iovine was in the studio with us with headphones on, making sure that the headphone mix was good, so we didn't have to play the song too many times. And we played the song. I think we might have played that song twice, if
Oh,
twice.
wow.
And Stevie and the girls were in the room singing live. If you listen to the vocal mics, without the drums were baffled up pretty good, but you can hear leakage into the vocal mics. So, it was just one of those magic albums. And the songs that were on there, the songs that are on that album, "Stop Dragging My Heart Around" was recorded by the Heartbreakers separately. But the songs that I got to play on that album and touring with Stevie, and I did some subsequent work with her on other albums, and I was her tour manager for a tour in the '80s. I forget which year it was, but it's always been a wonderful experience working with Stevie, and she is as big right now out there as anybody is. I mean, she is an iconic star. And my brother Waddy is out there as her musical director, and she's killing it,
Yeah,
still killing it. Yeah.
absolutely. And you spoke beautifully about Joni's voice. Tell me about Stevie's voice then. What's it like to be up close and hearing that in the studio?
Haunting, you know.
Very good.
Stevie's voice draws you in immediately, whether you want to or not. And her personality does the same. She's absolutely infectious, and a sweeter person you couldn't ever meet.
Fantastic stuff. Well, Russ, it's been an absolute pleasure hearing your top five incredible list of records. Just to run you through once more time, Sweet Baby James by James Taylor, New Morning by Bob Dylan, Tapestry by Carole King, Blue by Joni Mitchell, and Belladonna by Stevie Nicks. And that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to your music. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Russ.
Paul, it's an honor. Anytime, my friend.